Welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. Hey Ben, welcome to the Mind Chimp podcast. How are we doing?
Great, how are you?
I'm wonderfully well. The sun is shining, so I can't complain. I don't think I can anyway.
No, not in England.
No.
Gorgeous weather, very nice.
This is it. Like, we only get 4 or 5 days, right? So we need to make the most out of it. So Ben, I guess with my guests, when I get them on the show, the first thing I tend to ask them is, what is their tagline, their log line, and do you know what yours is?
Log line? I've never really thought about this in those terms before, but I suppose I'd say very much an employee experience explorer.
Oh, nice. Nice, I like that. I guess we'll jump into that in just a sec. However, what I want to do first is I want to just fire some quick words at you, and I want you to just tell me what comes to mind when I say these.
Oh dear, are you a psychologist?
Here's a couple of pictures of just some black dots and tell me what you see. No,
a butterfly. It's always a butterfly. Or a bat. Yeah. Oh, that was Batman, wasn't it?
Perfect. Okay, so the first one, employee experience.
Employee experience, everything.
Okay. Culture.
National.
HR.
Change.
Values and behaviours.
Critical.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So, when you was in school, Ben, and the teacher would say to you, Ben, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was it you would say to that teacher?
I went through an evolution on this. I started off as an ice cream van driver.
Okay.
I was fixated on the ice cream vans when I was a kid for obvious reasons. We like ice cream. From there, I progressed to a professional rugby league player. And I kind of pursued that with all the vigour that I could between the ages of 8 and 16. And I was doing okay. But the talent didn't stretch so far. So then I had to seriously reconsider everything about my life.
Fair enough. So tell me a little bit about the tagline. So you mentioned you kind of want to, an employee experience explorer. So yeah, maybe break that down for me a little bit.
Well, for me, so I started off in customer experience when I was young, and developed a real interest in people and customer experiences. And, those first few roles I had were very interesting, just observing human behavior, the way people responded, their emotions, their backgrounds, the decisions they took in moments within the customer experience. So I looked at the customers, but I also looked at the way professionals were dealing with that. So that kind of grew my fascination with people and humans. And I thought, where's best to apply my trade around that? And that's what led me to human resources. So from there, it's just been a kind of a long-term exploration of employee experiences in a wide variety of organizations globally and locally. I've worked internally for a long part of my career, but the last few years I've been out and about looking some of the world's biggest organizations, but also some of the high-growth organizations as well. So understanding what they're doing differently in some cases, but what needs to change in other cases. So really, that's where I would come from in terms of an employee experience explorer. It's a genuine and sincere interest that I have. So it becomes something more of a lifestyle choice than a profession.
Oh, nice. So I think I came across you originally, we've talked back and forth on LinkedIn over a while now, but I think I came across you through Mike Collins, and he was at River Island, and I think you was doing some work there or something like that. But ever since then, I've always kept up with what you kind of up to and whatnot. But I guess, and that's kind of what's. So I kind of see I've been doing employee experience before it became cool, and I didn't know I was doing it, and then I kind of looked at people who are doing it really well, i.e. you, and kind of followed you and kept up to date. But I guess this first question really is kind of looking at employee experience now. What are the top challenges you see with maybe given how much you can talk about your clients and NDAs and whatnot? But yeah, what's the biggest challenges you see within employee experience at the moment?
Well, for me, I mean, the evolution over the last few years has been really tremendous everywhere. So I've traveled to 16, 17 countries now. So I've got a first-hand take on and look at what organizations are doing and where the initial pain points are within that employee journey. I think a large part of it is understanding what it is in the first place. So I think you've seen a lot of pivots from organizations, customer experience, communications, branding, employee engagement. I think there's been a massive rebrand of tech firms as well to focus more on the employee experience and delivering value. So I think that's been a big change, and people are still getting around that. But for practitioners, I think the big thing is, understanding what it is in the first place. How do we move the needle on the employee experience? Where do we focus first within the employee journey? And then having to deal with this completely new mindset, which employee experience is. Because traditionally, if you've had a narrow focus within a specialism, whether it's learning and development, HR, estates, marketing, IT, that's been your kind of where you focused. But now we're saying experiences are on top of the organizational agenda. That really cuts across all departments and functions and responsibilities, and politics and accountability. All that stuff comes into play when you're trying to sort out, okay, who's doing what and how do we work together as, say, one unified coalition or team to propel the employee experience forward and develop the things that employees want you to develop, as opposed to just, bringing in new technology because it makes sense to the business when actually it doesn't make any sense to employees. I think a good example of that recently was the digital interviews. So our organization is saying, this is very efficient and we're doing great and this is very well done project, use of technology. But when you look at the candidate experience, no one actually wants it. They prefer, I think 91% of a recent survey from the BBC said, we want human contact. So I think balancing all these priorities, balancing humans and technology. I did a piece today for the Economist, and it is balancing that human and technology piece. And some will go overboard focusing on the technology because it's nice, it's new, it's shiny, and it looks good, and it feels like you're doing something meaningful. Others will go all out on the human experience. So it's getting that balance right.
So I guess kind of going right back to, I mean, you talk about kind of moving the needle, but how do we do that? I mean, on one hand, you've got the great ideas of the business, and then it's a bit like this Instagram versus reality, right? You've got the great ideas, and then you've got the business where they kind of got so much hierarchy and legacy systems and legacy processes and stuff like that. How do we even start this change?
I think the big thing is getting all the touch point owners, so the people who are essentially accountable for architecting or designing the employee experience, together in some form, and looking at how they operate as a unit across the entire employee journey. I think that's a big thing. So some are forming their own departments around this, employee experience teams, where they bring into that function as many touch points as possible. So real estate, catering, internal comms, learning and development, HR, technology, all these different touch points. And then we can have an accountable strategic leader that is responsible very close to the board to move these areas forward. So I think that's one approach. The other approach is this coalition of experience where you are creating more of it's co-creation at its finest when you're working on the alignment and accountability between all these professionals. So I think that's where most start. In reality, I'd like to see organizations get much closer to employees very, very quickly when they start their employee experience projects. Because I think we're still in that situation where you develop something at maybe a central HQ, and then you go out and talk to employees about what you've actually created. Whereas I think if we're doing employee experience true to its nature, which is, it's all about humans, then I would bring them into the process much earlier and work from there. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges in there, but there's a lot of opportunities to create some really great work, really quite quickly with this new approach.
So this is fascinating for me. I guess 2 weeks ago I created an article on LinkedIn. I talked about this kind of chief experience officer, and actually how we need to start building experiences from the exactly how you've just said it, basically, exactly from the customer or the employee, and then these I kind of put it into this nano, micro, and macro experience, and actually this kind of, they all have a domino effect on one another, and you have to start from this very human-centered approach and this human-centered design, and design from that experience outwards, I guess. So it's awesome to really say that. I guess the thing what I'm struggling with, I guess, is when we, our people, our customers, if you like, if you put into the customer experience, they want this uber personalised experience now. And in one hand you can give that, but in the other hand you've got to say, right, well, I need this data to be able to give you this uber personalised experience. How do we judge, how do we manage that as a business, maybe?
I think a big frame of reference for employee experience is expectation management. So I think understanding what consumers actually want, what customers are actually saying, and then bringing that detail into the employee experience is a very good thing to do. And there's a company in Australia where they've been on my radar for a long time, engineering firm, and they went out and asked their clients, what are the attributes? What are the types of people that you want us to bring together within our organization to best serve and meet your needs and go beyond your expectations? So they did that research and brought it all back into the employee experience. And that's the way they designed it holistically. And they're now one of the top workplaces in Australia and doing some great things within their sector. But I think that's still a radical approach, I've got to say. Much of the economy just doesn't get it at that level of depth or maturity from the get-go. So to see someone doing that, going out to customers saying, what are you telling us and how can we utilize that within the employee experience? But I see other examples as well within the third sector, charity sectors of companies not second guessing or trying to presume they know employees and what they want. HR is not there to be the voice of the employee. Employees have their own voice, in my view. So it's a case of getting that voice as closely connected to your work as possible. One example springs to mind. They did a hackathon, which I love that kind of stuff. But they brought employees into it and they said, what are the top priorities for us to work on holistically across the business? And surprise, surprise, it went completely against the expectation of what the senior HR and the VP of HR were expecting. That was amazing. In fact, they suspected technology would be top of the list. It was actually bottom of the list. It mattered very little to employees what technology they were using, as long as it was good enough to do the job, essentially.
Yeah, I think technology is an interesting one, right? Because we have this very disjointed experience as a professional and then as a consumer. And, I talk about this a lot, about this consumer experience and, outside of work, how we use tech and the frictionless approach we have of tech tends to be very different to once we go into work, and then we have this very clunky, kind of high friction, frustration tech in place. And I think you've got a couple of companies like maybe it's Workday, who their HR system seems a little bit more fresh than say other experiences what I've been through, especially in the initial, when the initial onboarding stage, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's a trend within a trend as well, because we're seeing, so the global players, so multinational corporations, many thousands of employees, they're starting to get braver and bolder within their decisions, which is good news for the economy, I think, because all of a sudden you've got all these small players or startups that have got an excellent product, but they'd be overlooked in favor of some of the bigger platforms and technology providers out there. But they're getting a piece of the pie now, which I think is good, because what they're doing is trying to innovate and serve the employee experience better. And that goes right across the whole journey from onboarding to the candidate to the L&D experience. And I think people have been surprised by some of the decisions. There's been, these really big organizations saying, well, we want to do things differently. And we can only do that if we bring in different providers who have a somewhat different take, and they've developed technology which is more intuitive, seamless, and connects to all the other platforms that they have within the business. It doesn't do any good to walk into a workplace and have 200 different apps for a million different things. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think connecting that and getting that sorted is a big priority, certainly for the bigger companies. Smaller companies, maybe not so. There's not so much urgency around that. But I think getting in place a good system or good tech from the early days is a good thing to do in any case.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it is that thing. It's kind of that scalable, kind of, does it have an element of collaboration? You know, is it just easy to use as well? Is massive, right? You know?
Yeah, it's funny. We still manage. I don't know about you, but you know, sometimes I have so many different virtual meetings, and I do digital coaching for executives. I do the employee experience practitioner programs, and much of that is delivered online. And you know, but sometimes you're getting so many different meeting requests from all these. Okay, we're going to Zoom today. We're going to Skype tomorrow. We're going to WeChat the other day. We're going to use Slack. We're going to, you know, even for individuals, I think it's hard to manage. And if you lose sight of what's really important, you can get lost in this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk about, you know, all of this, when all said and done, is here to serve the human beings within the organization, to help us become as productive as we can be. And I think sometimes the technology takes over the conversation. It's about making the technology work as opposed to the humans.
So I guess who are the people who, you know, again, you know, given your clients and whatnot and what you can talk about and what you can't talk about, Ben, but who are the clients other than maybe the Australian company that you just mentioned? Who are the people who you see kind of getting this right and just being the kind of the trailblazers on this, I guess?
I mean, there's so many organizations, and I've got an encyclopedia that I've collected from around the world, from a lot of these different countries. It would depend which market you're talking about, because I think there's different levels of maturity. So I've been to places like Belgium, Israel, the US, Australia, Singapore, China, and on all these places, they're in very different positions with employee experience. Some are very well warmed up. Others, there's some lag behind. In the UK, who am I talking about? I like some of the high growth companies, the ones that are really kind of ripping out the employee handbook, as it was, in terms of how they build an organization. Companies like Huel and Brewdog and Gymshark. I think I like some of those. On a bigger scale, we are looking at some of the tech firms. Microsoft have been doing some exceptional work on employee experience across what is a very diverse and global organization, and with many footprints. Consulting firms are always up there, as you would expect, in terms of early adoption. So I think there's been some good examples coming from their internal employee experiences. But the thing about employee experience is we're seeing examples from right across different sectors now. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. Everyone has the opportunity to elevate their engagement outcomes, which is fantastic. And I think there's some research out there that's just kind of proven that point in practice. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, what you're focused on, what sector you're in. You all have the ability to create a really exceptional brand experience that serves the humans, but also your shareholders or societal stakeholders as well.
So I guess kind of, you know, when we look at, say, the employee experience, and let's look at the life cycle and whatnot. One of the biggest things we see, and maybe it's in the attraction and getting them in for an interview. I'll talk about my experience. Actually, this might help. So my experience, what I've had in the past, is the job title or the job spec or the job description is never it's full of lots of made up words. Well, not made up words, but overly used words when really it could have probably been wrapped up in a sentence. Once you go in there, you kind of promise the world, you promise a unicorn, and actually what you end up getting is a horse with a party hat on, and you kind of just sat there going, well, this wasn't the thing what I thought. And then you go through this whole stress of the interviews and whatnot. So how do we fix that initial stage? Because I mean that's one what's not necessarily near and dear to me, but I think it's one what people can relate to very quickly and very easily because they've probably gone through many interviews and whatnot. But how do we fix that old approach?
Yeah, and it's crazy if you're promising things that you can deliver on the inside. And it often comes out of the candidate experience. I've had some dreadful candidate experiences early in my career, to the point where I walked out of several interviews because I just didn't didn't like what they were doing, and I thought they were very rude within the process. And I was junior, I had nothing behind me at that stage, but I still think you deserve to be treated and respected through that process. And also, if they're making promises that they can't keep. I've been in situations where I've said, "Are you serious about doing some great organizational development work?" And you can tell they're not really that serious. It's just more lip service. So I think fixing that at CEO level is a big challenge, because I think CEOs will dictate a lot of the approach, and your employee experience and customer experience will largely be a reflection of your top team and CEO. So I think that's the biggest challenge, changing the mindset and the ability of the top team to really lead this. Because the great thing about employee experience is it's not just it's not a HR thing. Likewise, it's not a marketing or comms thing or an estates thing. It's not about the quality of the workplace you have. It's about all of that, and it needs to be led strategically across and throughout the business, which is a big difference between other approaches, which have been more top-down, organization-centric. So this really does change the game in that respect. Actually, operationally going in and fixing some of the candidate experience, well, for me, it starts with telling the truth. It sounds like a very, very simple thing, but tell the truth to your prospective employees. Share the truth with them. If you're not this old singing and dancing startup that's well-funded and, it's about creating the picture of reality. What is it that's going to attract the people that you want to bring into your business? And sometimes the truth will be, quite harsh to some people. When you're living your values, those values may not resonate with everyone, but they will resonate with your target audience. So I think being more truthful throughout the candidate experience, making sure you're promising what you deliver, and that on day one, you haven't realized that you signed up to a completely different organization than the one that was sold to you. So values, I think, is a big thing. We're seeing the resurgence of values-based interviewing. So moving away from culture fit to values. Are we aligned? Are we being authentic? Are we moving forwards with similar values? I think is really, really important.
So I guess I have a love-hate affair with values and behaviours. And I'm not sure whether I have a love-hate affair of values and behaviours or a love-hate affair of how I've seen them rolled out. I think it's the latter rather than the first. Because here's the thing, right? Here's my experience of values and behaviours. Business says, hey, these are our top 5 values, and here's behaviours, what underpin the values. We're going to stick them up on a board, and we're going to live by them. High five, everybody. High five. And then a week later, that board of values and behaviours becomes background, because we've walked past it every day, and it's not embedded, and it kind of becomes this thing of, actually, by us bringing people on with the same values, are we being diverse? Are we, and also I think one of the things with values is there's so much nuance between the values of what I think maybe a value of bravery is different to maybe what you think bravery is, and I think it becomes this very grey area sometimes, and a little bit challenging to kind of navigate. Is that fair to say, or would you say, actually, I've just had a bad experience in life?
No, we are the residual of our experiences, so I'm not surprised you're saying those things, because if you've encountered and experienced an employer that hasn't lived their values, I remember the famous reception piece on the wall at Enron, which said honesty, integrity. That didn't work out too well. So we've all had these experiences, but when you walk into a human-centered organization focused on building a real, genuine community, that it's very difficult to leave it, and it's very difficult to walk away from that. So I've interviewed lots of people in the last couple of years about their experiences, and the strength of the language when you've had one of these great experiences, and the way that the values come through in the conversation and dialogue. People using language like, it was 4 years ago since I worked for this organization, but if they asked me to do something today, I would go back and I would run through walls for them. So there's been a deep connection there. which I think you can only facilitate through how you apply the values within the holistic employee experience. Now, the problem with most organizations is that they don't understand the connection between the values that they espouse at the strategic level and then how they operationalize them within the everyday experience. That's a big gap within the connection, and that's where most organizations fail. The ones that deliver better performance and better results on the human and business dimensions are the ones that get and harness and leverage that potential. So everything becomes an opportunity to amplify your truth within the organization. The values you have, you can experience them as you walk into a business, and you can experience them through the L&D program, through everything that goes on. But there's also room for you to find your own truth as well. So what's your purpose? What's your mission? What's your values? And then how do they connect? Because largely, I don't know about you and how you make your choices, but I'm looking for organizations that share my values. You know, even in the clients we take on and some of the executive coaching clients, I'm still looking at the values. You know, what's driving these people and how did they align with this kind of bigger mission that we're on within employee experience?
Yeah, I think it is that. I think I've seen maybe values, things like don't be a dick. I'm like, really? Is that a great value? I'm not sure, because it feels like that's just too open-ended. It's too open-ended. Like, you know, maybe me having given some direct feedback or receiving some, I could say, actually, that guy's being a dick. And actually, no, he's not. He's just being a clear, authentic leader and giving feedback, you know, in the right moment. And I think that
it's really interesting. And you know, you look at radical candor as an approach.
Yeah.
Would that work anywhere else apart from Bridgestone within that context? So this is a big thing, and I agree with you that the context matters for where you deploy these things and how you develop the organization. You know, so I had a masterclass in London last week, and I put up that one of those slides around "Don't be a dick," and you can imagine what happened to the room. I did it at the UK Employee Experience Awards as well. That was 400 or 500 people. I'm just looking at the responses, because you will get half of the room and say, "Yes, I love that. Wow, it's great." And then the other half will be like, "That's completely inappropriate for the workplace. I don't know. Well, you know, what does that actually constitute? I don't know what that means." But that's okay. That's okay. It's for the organizations to prove in practice that they actually stand for that value, and it runs through every single thing that they do. Now, if they can, they're not really being sincere about it.
Yeah, I think going back to kind of what you mentioned a little bit earlier about this, you know, the CEO and the top board. Actually, I think the CEO, you know, top down to the top four, if you like, the top board of management. But from that point onwards, it needs to be this bubble up approach.
Mm.
And
I think you dropped that on purpose just to get me swearing on them.
maybe.
If that's your headline now, this is completely and intentionally engineered. I just want it set on the record. Ben Whitter says, "Don't be a dickhead."
I love it. But so you know, I guess people who don't know kind of the stuff what you're up to, they need to get their ass in gear and do that. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about, because I guess you've been good to me, Ben. When I've asked you a question with employee experience or we've challenged stuff, you've always been there to kind of give me a bit of feedback, direct me and stuff. So, but maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the world of Employee Experience Institute and what that's all about.
Yeah, so we've been building for the last year or so. I went after China, so I was in China for 3 years, again exploring the employee experience and working with organizations. From there, went on the tour. You know, usually people have a book to sell first and then they go on the world tour, whereas I've done the opposite way around. Because, I mean, what drove that was I wasn't entirely satisfied with what I've seen around employee experience. And I didn't think we were talking about the same things. So I wanted to find my truth and connect with people within organizations that were moving the employee experience agenda to really look at, you know, what is the research? What are practitioners across different sectors, different size organizations? What are they doing and what are they saying? And how does that all align? So it's been a really challenging couple of years because, you know, some of my assumptions have been proved to be incorrect. And I put that down in the book. So there's some surprises around, what is employee experience, and that's been a key thing. So the World Employee Experience Institute is there to, reinforce our message and help share our research and our work through our practitioner training programs and masterclasses and keynote talks, but also now certifying people around employee experience. So working with them very closely to kind of share our model for employee experience and develop them within the context of it. So that's what we're doing now. And it's been a fascinating journey, simultaneously writing a book, trying to build two brands and all of this kind of stuff. But it's been a lot of fun.
So I guess kind of, I want to maybe change context a little bit and actually, when we go for interviews, we're told we've got to show this best version of ourselves, and we tell, time and time we've done X, Y, Z, and basically blow smoke up your own backside. But actually, I think the better question is time and time a failure? And actually, if I was to ask you what your failure resume looks like, what one jumps out on your failure resume, Ben? What's one thing? What jumps out? Maybe it was a time where, in the moment, it seemed like a big failure, but in the end, it ended up being this positive outcome. I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the perfect interview answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I was a big failure, but through my tenacity and resilience, I overcame. We won gold at the Olympics. I'm not sure it works out like that. I think this is what I talk about within employee experience. I mean, if we're in the business of creating happy workplaces with happy people who are always smiling, then I don't think we're really focused on employee experience, because the reality is employee experience is about human beings, and life just isn't like that. Life is a bit of a roller coaster, and it's up and down. So for me, it's been taking the ups with the downs and making sure I learn and grow through some of the challenges. Failure-wise, I think the way I work is reference points. So I'm looking for reference points that are either positive or develop me in some way. So it's, what are the positive reference points? Am I collecting enough of those to give me evidence that I'm on the right track in terms of fulfilling my purpose? And then the development stuff, I think if you're not making any mistakes and you're not, failing, then I don't think you're trying that hard. So there's been some experiments we've been doing around engaging people in our work. That's ongoing. But the other thing for me was, I think the biggest one was moving to China. So I took a bit of a risky decision to uproot and go to China. And the first year, I must say, was a real challenge. Getting to understand the context, the culture, the nuances, the differences, all of that stuff within what is a really interesting place to work. So that was interesting. But then year 2, year 3, we looked, we explored, I explored, and developed within the context of that. And then lo and behold, we started delivering great results. So I think that was a big learning curve, moving to another country. I've done it several times, but China was a big one. But that's worked out really well. I've been back there this month, last month now, and at Christmas. So my relationships are growing, and we're getting stronger there all the time.
Awesome. Okay then. So let's pretend then you've got a stadium and you've got a billboard outside the stadium. And this stadium is going to, 1 million fans are going to come out of this stadium, okay? And we're all going to see your billboard. What's the message?
Billboard?
Yeah, like
what's that?
It's like a big post where you put posters up, like when you see a new film is coming out of the pictures.
Billboard.
Yeah. And basically, you can shape 1 million people's minds. What would you put on that billboard? Maybe it's a message, maybe it's an image. What would you put on there?
Ooh, that's a good one. Live your truth.
Okay. Why that one?
Because I think for the past few years, I've been down the rabbit hole of employee experience, and I've been interested in looking at what is employee experience within the context of organizations, but also what is experience within the context of our life on this planet. And I think having purpose is one thing, And I think that's great. I found my purpose when I was 25. I know exactly the moment when I found it. And then I started to believe in it and live it. But the problem is I didn't know how to live that purpose. So I think that was an interesting one for me. So the purpose, you start with why till the cows come home. But if you don't know how to live that purpose and fulfill it on a daily basis, then you're going to run into a lot of trouble, and you're not going to be able to kind of get back up at some of these stages. So I think having a mission and living your values in the way that you build the relationships and everything else is really quite important. And that, to me, becomes your truth. So do you have a purpose? Are you fulfilling your purpose? Do you have a mission within the context of that purpose? And are you developing and cultivating the right values that will serve the mission and the purpose? So that becomes your truth. And then the secret is to live it, to take risks, to be bold, courageous, to put yourself out there and stand for something on this planet whilst you're here. I think this is what a lot of people don't do. And I think if we can encourage more people, the 1 million people in the stadium, to do that, then I think it's going to be a great outcome.
Okay. Lovely answer. Okay. If I was to ask you, you have to give a gift of a book to 5 people, and maybe this book could be something what you've read and it shaped your whole mindset, or it's completely challenged you, and you have to give this book as a gift to 5 people, what book would you give? And it can't be your own, because I don't want that to be a spoiler just yet. Yeah, I want to get into that with you in just a sec. But yeah, it can't be your own.
Book would I give? See, I'm a big fan of Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. That was one that shaped my early thinking. Some of his essays within that book are really quite good. So that's a look at. And then the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin is another one. I think that is one book that influenced me more than any other, I've got to say. And I still remember it pretty much word for word today, in the way that he developed his life and made an impact, and even some of the methodologies and early organizational development approaches he used to deliver what was a successful life for him. So I think those are 2, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Benjamin Franklin autobiography.
Cool. Okey-doke. I'll add them to my reading list for sure. So let's get into your book, because obviously you've got a book coming out in August. Am I right in saying that, Ben?
Yeah, August 3rd in the UK, August 28th worldwide.
Beautiful. So maybe, tell us a little bit about this book, kind of where this idea come from, what's been going on, and without giving too much away, because obviously people need to buy the book. Kind of give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour and how you kind of come up with this what is, I'm assuming, is going to be a lovely book.
Yeah, so this is an outcome of the research I've been doing for the last few years on employee experience. So it includes some of the household names in employee experience, Airbnb and SAP and others. We're really focused on what is employee experience, because I don't think this question has been fully answered yet. So I just wanted to understand more and go deeper into employee experience across the economy, rather than just in, say, multinational organizations or certain sections of the economy. So I've looked at charities, I've looked at large organizations, so it kind of converges around creating this new lens for employee experience. And that's a major outcome of the book, which is the vision that we have for employee experience. That's actually a kind of short summary. There's some surprise in there. I surprised myself with where we ended up with the research and the dialogue and the discussions. But yeah, for me, whenever I go to these conferences, I'm invited to speak. Everyone's surprised that I don't turn up with a book to sell. So I kind of figured out it was about time I put some thoughts down out there, and let's see how they do.
Cool.
So that's a big part of it as well.
So obviously, I know a couple of authors, and they say kind of how the book becomes like it's like a child, and it becomes this project of love. So this question might be a bit of a tricky one to answer, but which of the chapters within your book was your most favourite to write? Or actually, let's rephrase that. Which of the chapters was your most favourite to read back on? Take that wherever you want, Ben.
Again, I'm very much a practitioner, so I like the cases. So we've got some deep cases from, some companies that will surprise some people, and as I say, some very established and mature employee experience organizations. So I like the cases. I like going into the depth of, how they're practicing employee experience and some of the things they focused on to develop great employee experience strategies that are actually really delivering amazing results. And I kid you not, these results are astonishing that we're seeing. And it could be an Airbnb, it could be companies in Asia that are just, there's something very different about this employee experience approach. I also I'm privy to lots of research that gets sent to me and our own internal research as well. And the outcomes are really quite sensational. And this is why I'm saying anyone's talking about employee experience as a new buzzword. They just really don't understand employee experience, or they haven't seen enough research about the impact it has.
Cool. So obviously you've done, for anyone who doesn't know, you've done lots of publications and stuff. But what was the hardest challenge for you writing this book?
Hardest challenge. I think, every person who decides to put the thoughts down on paper and put something out there, I think sometimes when you come to write, you have to sit down and just think about the way you want to communicate certain ideas. So I think that was an interesting process to go through. And then working on the feedback, making sure you're communicating the ideas that you want to put out there and stand behind. So getting to that point, that was a challenge, because certain, it could be nuances in sentences that mean something completely different, or it could be a view that isn't expressed as good as it could be. So I just wanted to make sure, and this is where the challenge comes in, that you're getting across everything that you want to stand behind for the rest of your life, essentially, because that's how long a book's going to be out there. But I'm comfortable, so I'm very comfortable, and I'll 100% stand behind everything that I put in there. I think that's the point that most people want to get to. If I was 50%, then I'd rethink the whole thing. But yeah, I'm very comfortable, and I've been sharing it with clients and the model for employee experience. We present it at some conferences. Starting to talk more about it as we get close to the launch day, and the response has been, it's been, kind of overwhelming given how much time and effort you put into this. But the response has been great. One session in the Midlands of the UK last week was the feedback by someone who came in quite skeptical, national HR director for a major global brand. But he said, this is something completely fresh and it's totally unique. And he fully got behind it. And I think seeing that was just incredible.
Yeah.
So it makes the challenge worthwhile. And I got through lots of cups of tea, I've got to be honest.
I mean, that kind of feedback, I suppose that's kind of the most valuable kind of thing you can get from this, right? It's that knowing that the blood, sweat and tears and the numerous cups of tea was definitely all worth it. But I guess, with you knew that, and for me, like I say, you're kind of, for me personally, one of the people who are following, is just relevant, interesting, like I say, fresh. But to get that from your conference in real time, that must have been awesome.
And the other thing, I think for me, it's been transformational, because sometimes, so I've been speaking at conferences around the world, and I wasn't selling anything, and I wasn't entirely clear on my personal vision and my connection to employee experience. So I was the one that started kind of talking about it very early, back in 2014, 15, talk about moving to experience. But I still wanted to go deeper in, what is it that's really making an impact? What is it that if we focus on it, we can really make some, massive moves quite quickly. So that's where I wanted to get to. But now, another piece of feedback from the HRD Summit at Amsterdam, I think that was last week. A guy came up to me, again, very well respected brand and director, and he said, you were very congruent up there. And I think anyone who studies psychology and NLP will understand the power of congruency. So that was another reference point that I kind of took from him, and okay, good, the message is strong.
Yeah, just a bit. I think it's interesting, and I guess for when we look at, say, potentially your audience of readers and stuff, is it fair to say that someone who's new to employee experience versus someone who's maybe been doing it without knowing who's doing it, or kind of new to the game? I take the book is kind of for everybody then. Is that a fair assumption?
Across the economy. So I'm making the case that if you take this employee experience approach, you can see some of the outcomes that these market-leading companies are delivering in practice. So it doesn't come down to cost, it doesn't come down to technology, it doesn't come down to scale, it comes down to where you focus your efforts and how you design the employee experience. Not even from end to end, although it's terminology I still use and is well used, this end-to-end experience. But the reality is, the experience never ends. It just doesn't end, because we're talking about companies. I'm still talking about an interview I had when I was something like 25 for a part-time HR officer role at an organization which they delivered a masterclass in how you deliver an interview process and a candidate experience. Now, this was a charity, but they were just so focused on making sure anyone who came into contact with their organization had a positive experience, that I still use it as best practice. And that was one of the best experiences. And I've worked in global organizations where it wasn't as good or anywhere near as good as that, the experience that they provided. And it comes down to the simple things: how you treat people, how you respect people, how you treat people like human beings when they come into contact with you. I think these things are more important than ever before, given the rise of technology and all the uncertainty and all the rest of it. So these are, big things.
Yeah, and I think experiences, they have an exit, but they have an extension. And, I talk about this kind of, even when you leave a business, if you're lucky to get an exit interview, there's problem number one, I guess. But afterwards, like there's a real value to that. Can be a real positive experience. Build an alumni, kind of have them be an active voice for your brand, even though they're not there. This is turning potential dips or average points into really high things, and still having that extension of that brand. And I guess talking, when you talked at the beginning about, if a company rang someone up and said they'd run through walls from them, that's the difference, right? That's even though you're leaving, and this sounds really cliche, it's not a goodbye, it's a I'll see you later kind of deal. And that's what it feels like, with this extension.
Yeah, I made the point last week, like the contract may come to an end, but the relationship will continue indefinitely, because we'll always be talking about experiences. Every time I run some kind of keynote or coaching session, we're talking from experience. And it's amazing how often people go to those memorable experiences that made an emotional imprint on them. So in Barcelona a few weeks ago, I just threw out the question, what's your most memorable experience? Now, you can take that where you wish, but I didn't give them any instructions. And someone came up with a very positive experience, and they shared that with 100 people in the room. Again, very good for that brand, whichever brand it was. But then equally, one of our colleagues came up with another example, which was completely negative, to the point that this guy left as a result of the experience that he had with his manager. So, and he shared that quite willingly with 100 people. So that brand impact is going to be even stronger as time passes, because as humans, we like to reflect on our experiences and somewhat amplify them, sometimes over-exaggerate in the context of the conversation or the way that we're referring people or communicating with fellow human beings. So the relationship will continue.
So then I guess this kind of leads me on to the next question then. So what do you see the future of employee experience being? And I guess I don't want to kind of put any more weight to that question. Where do you see it going? Where do you see, what in 5 years, maybe 5-10 years? I don't know. Take it wherever you want to go with that one, Ben.
So I think we'll see an initial increase in the use of technology across the whole journey, the employee journey. But then I think eventually we'll see a return to the humans. So I think some people will be running off and kind of finding and buying the technology to deliver more interactive or seamless experience. But I think a big driver of that is efficiencies and scale as well. So I think there'll be something around technology and and the way humans interact with each other. So that they must be in balance. So I think organizations, certainly multinationals, will be focused a lot on that, how they balance the online with the offline, and make sure they're focused on the entire holistic journey as opposed to just the technology experience. So I think that's theme number one. I think theme number two is around really embracing this human centricity within organizations as well. Again, we'll see more organizations looking at the entire employee journey. I think that will continue as more cases and more evidence and more PR outcomes come in. This is really good for business. So we'll see lots of organizations trying to establish their own compelling employee journey, which is differentiated from others in their sector. Whether you're a charity or a multinational, you need to stand out and differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And I think that's where people will be focused within their employee experience. So how do we deliver a positive experience, but a differentiated one? And I think organizations will be using people analytics a lot more skillfully and intelligently to do that. And then advances in AI and technology will be able to really measure some of the outcomes based on specific business drivers within employee experience. So that's another thing. Things like organizational network analysis and other things now are really starting to mature. And once they're fused into the employee experience approach, again, we'll start to see big wins for companies in really short periods of time. I think the turnaround on some of this work is really quite exceptional if you have the right data in place as well.
So I guess one of the things which recently I put out an article, and then I read an article from, I can't remember who it was from now, it was talking about how every company should have a chief experience officer. And actually it's today when I was doing a bit of research before this podcast, I was like, Ben's got chief experience officer. I've never even noticed that. And it's one of the things where I've read that and gone, oh my days. But, for me, I design experiences. That's how I've always defined what I do. I define experiences, I design them, and it's wherever you want to take that experience, or put it in whatever category: learning, employee, customer, whatever. That's been my career really. But I guess how, maybe for our listeners and people who are a little bit like me, kind of struggling to find that identity because they're quite general in how they design experiences and not necessarily niche down to employee or customer or whatever. How does someone become the next Ben? How does someone become the next chief experience officer?
For me, there's a few different routes to get there these days. Employee experience has really opened up the type of person you can attract to become a chief X officer or a chief CX officer. So I think, all is to play. I get called by headhunters asking how they should design their job descriptions for chief employee experience officers. And the advice I'm giving to them is very much grounded in, where is their focus and mindset, and where's the evidence that they've been demonstrating a real sensitivity and empathy with the experiences that people have in work. And that could be from any background, really, in terms of product. It could be brand experiences, customer experience, the technology experience, the employee experience more generally. So I think it's all to play for there. And the chief employee experience officer, it's surprising how many people are coming from non-traditional backgrounds, whether that's marketing, communications, or HR. There's a lot of commercial leaders coming into those chief X roles, which is really good. So if you're developing a good portfolio, a good range of experiences within experience and design, and also design at the operational stage, but also the strategic piece as well. So again, some strategic accountability for elements of the experience, I think is great to have within your locker. But for me, I'd love to see lots of different people coming into the chief experience roles, because that's where you get some great ideas. They look at, you have the ability to look at things really fresh and see the pain points with new eyes and to innovate in a different way. Whereas if they're all going from one function, I think that there's an element of we're not getting some of the best ideas in there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've probably been designing a flow for probably the last 3.5 years, on how to design these experiences. And I think the three biggest points, without going into detail, is this human-centered design, this experience design, and this understanding awareness of consumer-grade experience within the tech world.
I like the way you position that. I love the way you position that, because that's very similar to my point of view on this, because there's no point trying to turn employees into internal customers, because I just think it's the wrong paradigm. It's the wrong lens, because customers, they will take their money elsewhere and they've gone. Employees have a contract. They have a deeper level of relationship. So I think you're absolutely right to say something like, it's about giving them consumer grade experiences rather than employees as consumers, because I don't think that's matching the reality of what we're seeing in the research, where people really get the employee experience approach. It's very much, employees are co-producers within the journey, and actually they're co-accountable for the outcomes within the employee experience and the customer experience. So yeah, I like that. That's good.
So if I was to say to Ben, explain what you do to a 5-year-old, how would you explain it?
Well, I help deliver positive experiences in work.
Okay. The next one, and you can take this as deep or as light as you want, Ben. Do you even like yourself?
Do I like myself? Yeah, generally, yes. It'd be very difficult to do what I did if I didn't. Standing on the stage or, putting my opinions out there. If you didn't like who you were, I think that's even trickier to do. So yeah, I think generally, yes. Other elements I'd like to improve? Well, humans, of course. I think we're all imperfect. But yeah, I'm in a good place with that.
Perfect. So if I was to say to five resources everybody should either read, look at, podcasts they subscribe to get into this employee experience and understanding how to design these experiences, what 5 resources would you recommend? And you can use your own stuff here as well, Ben. I feel like you should.
Number 1, Employee Experience by Ben Whitter.
Yes.
20% discount for your listeners, very special discount. Use code MrX at koganpage.com/X. And your listeners can get 20% off. So that's number 1. Number 2, benwitter.com. That's always useful. 3, worldeeinstitute.com. So we're developing our practitioner and team programs through the World Employee Experience Institute. And then number 5, everything around you is cultivating who you are and what you have the potential to do in life. So I would be open-minded around the way you view experiences, the way you view interactions, walking into your town or going to the shop or being served by someone or serving someone else. I think just really tune into the experiences and be with the people who you're working with and who you're having an experience with. I think that's where a lot of my learning has come from, working with employees and understanding humans. So having a genuine curiosity for the interactions that you have and reflecting on them, I think is a great thing to do.
Awesome. Who would you recommend? Maybe it's 3 people everybody should follow on LinkedIn or on Twitter.
Not really sure. I think for this, I don't know. I'm more interested in an organization's context. I'd certainly be following your CEO. I think that's number 1. Your HR director. That's still number 2 in the context of where employee experience is at. In the future, it could be a chief employee experience officer or your marketing director or brand director or chief experience officer. But yeah, certainly some of those figures. But I would focus on the organizational context initially, because I think that's, as a practitioner, that's where I'm focused. And with clients, I do the same. So it's focused on some of the senior leadership. What are they focused on? What are their values? What are their priorities? I'd go after those as opposed to external thought leadership, to be honest. I'd be focused really on the context.
Awesome. I love the way you took that question, and that's awesome. So I guess, Ben, right at the start of the session, of a call. Yeah.
Is this turned into a session? Can I send you an invoice?
So right at the start of the call, I asked you kind of, when you was younger, what did you want to be when you grew up? And as you know, we're constantly learning, we're constantly developing. So if I was to ask that question, Ben, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you say now?
Inspiring.
Okay.
And I think that's very open, because you can be inspiring anywhere you are. But I think to inspire people with what you do and the impact you have, and some of the things that you get to work on, I think that's always a good aspiration. When I found what I wanted to do, which was, funnily enough, work in HR initially, so I went and got a master's, and then I practiced for a long time. It was all about making a dent, or making an imprint, or inspiring someone. So I think that's always a good aspiration wherever you are.
I agree. Beautiful. So, Ben, where can people kind of, if you want to find out what Ben's up to, and the stuff what you're doing, and where you're travelling and whatnot, and where can we find the book? Where can we go to keep in touch with you and the stuff what you're up to?
So LinkedIn is always a good place to find me. Twitter, less so, but I'm starting to get more active there. For any international colleagues in Asia, I'm on WeChat. I use that quite frequently. Those are I would say, the main places. And if you have any follow-up questions as a result of this, you can feel free to drop me an email, ben@worldeeinstitute.com. I will always reply. There may be slight delays, but I will always reply.
Awesome, Ben. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for the great questions.
No problem, Ben. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.